Good evening. Today is Wednesday, August 14th, 2024. We have a quorum present, and so I would like to call to order this regular meeting of the Board of Commissioners of the Chittenden Solid Waste District. Before we begin our business, I just wanted to make take a brief moment to welcome Wendy Duncan to our Board of Commissioners as our new alternate from the town of Essex. She'll be backing up Alan Nye. Welcome very much, Wendy. We'll do our best to not throw too many acronyms out or stop and try to explain what we're talking about. Also wanted to thank Marguerite Ladd for her 2 years of service as the alternate for the town of Essex. Wendy is replacing her, so welcome, Wendy. First item on the agenda is the agenda itself. I have one change that I'd like to make, which is to move other business to before the executive session. We have been in the practice in the last several months when we have an executive session with no action anticipated as a result of the executive session, that out of courtesy for our video services that we move other business to before the executive session, which of course is not recorded. And I would like to do the same this evening. Are there any other changes or modifications to the agenda?
No.
Hearing none, we'll proceed to follow the agenda as I just outlined by moving other business to before the executive session. Second item on the agenda is a public comment period. There are no members of the public present in the CSWD meeting room. Are there any members of the public attending via Zoom or telephone who wish to address the Board of Commissioners?
There are not.
I am hearing none, so I will close the public comment period. Move on to the consent agenda, which is item number 3. Consists of the minutes of the July 10th, 2024 board meeting and our program update memo and charts. I want to make one minor clarification that will be noted in the final approved minutes. In the section of the minutes that dealt with the approval of the purchase of a new truck for hauling of organics, the minutes as presented in the packet have the voting results appearing before the discussion. In fact, there was discussion, there was then a motion to call the question, which was approved, and then we voted on it. So the final minutes will move the voting results, which were unanimously in favor of it. They'll be moved to the end of that section of the minutes. Any other requests for modifications or to pull something from the consent agenda?
I wasn't here for July, so I would need to abstain.
Very good, we'll note that, but if there are no other objections, then the consent agenda will be accepted as.
Wilson will abstain as well, since I was not in attendance.
Very good. Seeing as there are no requests to pull any other item, and just in cognizance of the one minor correction to the minutes, the consent agenda is approved as presented, noting the 2 abstentions for commissioners who were not present. Next item on the agenda is personnel rules and regulations change. That appears in your board packet after the charts and memoranda program reports. So I will turn this over to Amy to walk us through.
Sure, thank you. So in our personnel rules and regulations, we have various buckets of time off that we offer our staff, and 2 of those are listed here: the holiday floater, which is Bennington Battle Day, and 2 days of personal time that employees receive are really used interchangeably with vacation. So it's requested time off for the Bennington Battle Day as you would use vacation. Personal time does show up a little bit differently for employees in the fact that they can call in and use that time with little notice. We're requesting to move those 3 days into vacation, so it would not add additional time off. It would just be less buckets and less tracking, and provide scheduling opportunities for managers. We did send this out to staff for input, and we didn't have any responses. And employees who had a situation where they needed to be out might use sick time in that way rather than personal time if it was something that was unexpected and met that requirement of sick time. So we are asking to make that change to simplify the tracking and the buckets. As I noted in the memo, one difference that we have is that an employee that leaves the district is paid out for only what they have accrued up to that point of departure. And so adding that 3 days, presumably if they hadn't used it and they left employment, there would be an additional cost. I will say it's unlikely, but that's a possibility, just so that that's known. So the request is that the board approve this change, and I did make a note that we are looking at other opportunities and structure for combined time off, but we haven't gone through all of the various components of that yet to have a proposal. So we would like to make this change effective tomorrow, if the board approves it. Are there any questions?
Alan?
Remind me, because I forget, do they get all of their leave at the start of the year, or do they have to earn it as we go through the year?
They get all of their time at the beginning of the year, but if they leave, so if somebody gets 120 hours on July 1 and they leave January 1st, they were only eligible for payment for 60 hours, because if it had been accrued, that's all they would have received, and that's all they can be paid out for. So if they use the 60, they don't get paid out for any remaining balance.
Thank you.
Ken, your hand is up.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah. I was, when I read it, I was thinking about, it caught my eye, the idea that we're giving up personal days, which can be done without a lot of pre-advance warning. And I just think that employees might appreciate not having to lie and say they were sick when they actually have a legitimate, personal day. I imagine everyone can imagine having to put a dog to sleep or having a mental health need that can't be pre-scheduled. First, I'd like to know what we feel about that issue, what you're asking employees to do if they're not sick and they need a day. And if you kind of agree with what I'm saying, I think a little simple language added to the motion allowing supervisors to grant vacation days without advance warning under certain circumstances would solve the problem.
That's a good question, Ken, and I do just want to note that under the definition of sick leave, it does say for mental health reasons. If an employee calls in, we generally are not asking them to disclose what that is. I mean, we certainly could, but we're monitoring the sick time that is used. It is relatively low, and we don't ask a lot of details generally. So in a case like that, if it was it felt like a mental health related issue and they called in, it would be granted, I would say.
I think that's great. I mean, if you could call up and say, I need a sick day, and not provide a doctor's note or say, I'm sick, I think that problem is nil. But
Yes.
but I don't know what can happen in the future, and I don't know what other supervisors would think about that in the future, and I don't know whether we're being clear or not. But I'll leave it to you.
Thank you, Ken. I had asked, this proposal had been brought forth to the executive board and was discussed at some length last week at the exec board meeting. I had asked a question, and I'll ask it again tonight just for the benefit of the other commissioners. This proposal would convert 2 personal days, which may not be taken by some employees, I believe, but would be converted to vacation time, which I think would have a higher chance of actually being used. And I asked the question, what's the financial ramification by rolling these 2 days from personal time into vacation time? Amy, if you wanted to answer, I could
Sure, I think we looked that up and last year there were 40 hours in total that weren't used, so just a few people that had not taken those days off. If it was converted to vacation and they didn't use it, employees can only carry over one time their vacation accrual, so we have had employees lose vacation for not using their vacation time, and we certainly encourage it. And it's not a lot of hours and it's not a lot of people, but the same could happen with vacation too, if they're not using it, that it would be lost time.
What I heard from Inga's answer is that the financial ramifications for the district are not material at all. So it's not a concern that we wake up one day and say, oh my goodness, we've just incurred a
Correct.
big new financial liability
No,
expense.
and on the contrary, we, as Amy said, we strongly encourage all of our employees to utilize their PTO. For a variety of reasons, you know, we certainly don't want folks burning out, and we want people to have as good a balance as possible between work and life. So we are regularly, routinely reminding folks to utilize their time. A list of the hours goes out to each manager at least once a month, so that the managers can kind of keep track of that, and if folks are, you know, they'll see in front of them if people are not taking their time, and they can, you know, encourage that. So we're, again, especially the past few years, it has been stressful with COVID and pandemic and things. We want to make sure people are utilizing that time off.
Thank you. Other questions? There is a resolution at the bottom of the memo, if that could be read out into the record.
Be it resolved that the Board of Commissioners of the Chittenden Solid Waste District hereby authorize the Executive Director to update the personnel rules and regulations to include simplification of paid time off by moving Bennington Battle Day and personal time into vacation time.
So moves up Burlington.
Seconded, Essex.
Second, Wilson.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded, the resolution to update the personnel rules and regulations to include paid time off by moving Bennington Battle Day and personal time into vacation time. Any further discussion on the motion? You want to just explain why this comes before
I can, certainly.
Okay.
As some of the new members may wonder why this is even before the board. And so it is a historical practice, frankly, and goes back to the first days of the district when the board was basically running the district before there was a general manager, and had a very key role in the operations at the time. So this was part of the functions of the board 30 plus years ago, and it has kind of remained as a function of the board, because at that time it was enacted by the board and only changes could be made by the board. So that has been the kind of historical reasoning why any changes in the personnel rules still come before the Board of Commissioners.
Is that articulated in the charter?
Not specifically, not clearly as such. It says that the board may hire a manager and delegate certain authorities to that person. But otherwise, all of the responsibilities of management, et cetera, first lie with the board until such delegation occurs. So delegation occurred a long time ago when the board first hired a general manager, created the job description, hired the person, and then some of those functions are also included in the contract for general manager, now executive director. But the initial responsibilities were there in the charter of the board.
Any other questions or discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. Any opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? The resolution, the motion is approved unanimously. Thank you very much. And again, appreciate the work that management does to take care of staff and appreciate the staff and take best advantage of the time that they have earned for their own personal benefits. Appreciation all around is what I'm trying to say. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is other business. Is there any other business to bring up before the board tonight?
Is now the time for me to bring up the cushions?
Yes, now's the time, Henry. Please go ahead.
Okay, yeah, this is Henry Bonges. I'm with Milton. Some of you may recall I was a fan of trying to recycle furniture, but that's quite a bit of work because furniture, when you break it down, it's, there's some metal, some wood, which may or may not be recyclable. But the biggest recyclable part in it is the foam. And I actually feel sort of stupid I didn't go down this route because my wife does upholstery, which she's amazing at. And the foam's just oil. And so I was working on, I got a bunch of foam I was gonna get rid of, and then it dawned on me, I called Sleepwell Recycling, which is where the mattresses go, that the district works with. And Josh is the one who used to be with CSWD, started his own business. It's a good story. I'm sure you're familiar with it. And he answered the phone and he said, "Hey, got some foam. Do you take that along with the mattresses?" And he said, "Absolutely." Well, of course, then the next step is, well, why don't we do it as part of the solid waste district? It's so obvious. And because the furniture takes a big part of the disposal. I mean, Sarah brought up some numbers, what percentage it is, but I have to see where that data actually comes from, because if that includes all the liquid waste that gets thrown in there and what have you, it's a little bit misleading. And also there's, if you look at the waste, that's waste, how much of it could have been recyclable if we just had a path? That's just looking at it, I'd say foam's got to be a big one. And so, given this obvious fact, what do we do? Do we require the cushions, or do we do nothing and just let some get thrown into the mattresses if people want to, and just make them aware? Or do we require the cushions be thrown in there? There's basically two types of cushions. Ones which are removable, that are not part of it, and you just throw them in there. And again, you don't have to pull the foam out of the covering on it. Josh said it's just like the mattress. If they rework it and they take them apart, that's perfectly fine. And if the cushions are attached to, I'll call it a couch, chair, ottoman, whatever, well, you just need a construction knife. You can just cut the cushion off of it, and they could then be recycled. So, that's what I think is sort of new information. Again, I called Josh as a private person, not as a board member, saying what I could do with my foam, and it drifted off to what I thought is a very positive conversation. And so I put it before the board. What how can I can make my suggestion or so, which is basically we require foam to go with mattresses, not to accompany furniture in the bin, or but so okay, I put that before the board there. Thank you.
Thanks, Henry. I don't want to, I think you've done a good job of giving us a little bit of history, and also for newer board members, explaining how we do have there is a private company that now deconstructs mattresses, and I believe is working very well. And I think the suggestion is to further explore if at least the foam component of furniture that's being disposed of could be either mandated to be diverted, or perhaps some other way that could be encouraged for diversion. Is that kind of, have I characterized, Henry, what you're bringing before the board?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Good. So I would, at this point, I think I appreciate raising the issue, bringing it to the attention of the board and to staff, and I'd ask that staff take a look at this and kind of look at the ins and outs of it, the different ramifications, certainly of if it were to be required, but also the ways that we can, as a district, could encourage this diversion, and ask staff to come back to us at a later date with recommendations and observations as to the feasibility of the idea.
Yeah, staff hasn't had a chance to review it. I mean, I just yesterday or so had an email with you and Sarah just to bring up a heads up. But yeah, this is, staff wouldn't have been prepped for this. I wouldn't expect.
Ken, your hand is raised on this issue.
Yeah, just wanted to kind of be clear in my head. Do we have the ability to require any such thing without without an act, or would this be more of a legislative thing that we try to push through if we like the idea?
We do have the ability through the ordinance process to require recycling or diversion of certain materials. And certainly the legislature obviously does as well, but we do have that authority.
Any other questions?
I guess.
Yes, Alan, go ahead.
Last week, I brought a couch to the Wilson drop-off. And I think that as well as looking at the requirement of the individual having to do something, maybe we also include that the district provide the ability to get rid of that if we go down that road, as opposed to having, a citizen having to drive it to downtown Burlington or something, that we look at, the same way that we do some of the other, they come pick up batteries and they do that kind of thing, and if there's something along those lines.
So you're referring to product stewardship?
Yeah.
One of the reasons why I'd like this to go back to staff to consider it, because there are a lot of ramifications that we don't know about. And one thing that pops into my mind is when colleges, close out at the end of the academic year, my understanding is there's a lot of furniture on curbs, and things like that just need to be better understood and considered. But again, you folks are on the front lines here dealing with these issues, and I think it's respectful for us to say, please take a look into it and get back to us with a recommendation and outline of the ramifications and potential complications.
I also, having had some history in waste management, just want to caution that I'm a little nervous about the board directing staff to look into particular waste streams. I think best practice is to divert as much as possible. And even with textiles, just clothing in general, it is a very difficult waste stream to repurpose, to collect, and to find a useful end life for. So at least just preparing ourselves that the answer that we get might not be the answer that we want to hear due to a number of complexities. We've been working on textile diversion for decades, and it still is an extremely complicated source to do because there's so many different material types, and just like single stream, there are challenges with that, and that's why not all of the recycling facilities in the state do sole source collection. They still, like in the kingdom, they still separate a lot of the materials. Up in the islands, they still separate out a lot of materials because it is difficult to have everything collected. The contamination comes with it, and why we're not collecting black plastics in Chittenden County, for one example, because each of the material types, I kind of relate it to a soap opera. They each have their own drama. There is something unique about each and every piece of material, depending on material type and even on color, size, shape, dimensions, what have you. So I say it's just precaution that there can be quite a bit of a runway of like, why not revisit filmy plastics again? So I just want to caution the board that that could become quite a runway of questions and asks for the staff. So I think looking into foam is a worthwhile endeavor, but just again, preparing that it may have a larger soap opera to it than we're ready for.
And one of the things I just want to thank you, Brent, for saying that brings up, maybe questions about how do we determine, what materials we're going to take, and maybe that would be a good topic for a board education item to talk about. Well, how do things get onto the MRF acceptable materials list? How do we determine what are some of the things that we're focusing on? One of the key resources that we have is the state's waste composition study. And so we look at what is being disposed, and we look at those categories, and we really home in on the items that are taking up a lot of the space in the disposed items, disposed materials, and see, can we focus on those items, which is why we're putting so much emphasis on food waste and food scraps, because it still is a significant portion of the disposed waste stream, almost 20%, 19%. So, so it was, but I think that's a good topic for us as, outreach team and policy team to bring to a future board meeting, and just let's talk about how we kind of prioritize things.
And even just a refresher on product stewardship.
Yes, that'd be
We're one of the few states with the highest number of product stewardship laws in the country.
That's right.
And a lot of it has to deal with hard to recycle materials, the expense, and pushing that responsibility back onto the manufacturers and not on the taxpayers and on the municipal entities that manage the materials. So it might be good to just have a refresher. I mean, I'm even curious of where the conversation has come, the last 5, 6, 7 years around packaging. And if that has even made it any further along in the legislature, probably not, but that conversation started when I was still at A&R, so.
Yeah.
Well, we're just talking again right now about proposal for foam. I think you've raised good issues. I don't want to get too deep into the pros and cons of any particular material. That's why we're asking staff to look at it. Henry, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, just want to be clear, this is not a textile issue, it's a foam issue. Josh says the textile that's wrapped around it is fine to leave on, he'll take care of that, okay? So it is not a textile issue. And, the questions are really like, obviously today, I could take mine and just throw it in with the mattresses, well, how much do you charge, okay? And if you require it, then does every CSWD now have to have a special foam bucket? Okay, to go with it, but yeah, it's the textile is not relevant. Josh will take care of that. He'll take that off. That gets whatever he does with it. I don't know. That's Josh's business. So just want to be clear on that.
Yeah, and textiles were an example of another product type that is finicky.
Yeah, I want to say focused on the principle and not on the material part of this discussion. I think it's a great discussion to have at this point, but we do need time to delve into it. I think the suggestion of looking back at our product stewardship and the list of materials would be a great subject. So Henry, thank you very much for bringing this up. Any other items to bring before the board under other business? If not, then we'll entertain a motion to enter into executive session for the purpose of discussing real estate transactions. Amy, could you read a motion into the record?
Sure. Motion that the Board of Commissioners of the Chittenden Solid Waste District go into executive session to discuss real estate negotiations where premature general public knowledge would clearly place the district, its member municipalities, and other public bodies or persons involved at a substantial disadvantage, and to permit authorized staff to be present for this session.
So moved.
I heard a motion from Essex. Is there a second?
South Burlington.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded to enter into executive session. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay.
Aye.
Any abstentions? We will now enter into executive session. Do we want to stay on?
Recording